Heart systolic murmur heard in the back. That's good. On X-ray, these things are mostly diagnosed initially with well, actually, most of the time they're diagnosed with clinically. Now, the thing that, the reason you take the pulse in the right hand versus the left hand, or the blood pressure in the right versus the left, is if that coarc occurs right there. If the coarc occurs right there, then you'll wind up with an elevated blood pressure on the right versus the left. Also, you can look at these vessels here and see how dilated they are because of the backup of blood. Repair of these things is basically cut and paste. Now, cyanotic heart diseases. Cyanotic, we'll start with these, right? We'll go through these 5 right here. Tricuspid atresia is, it says right there, the pathophysiology. There's no forward blood flow through the tricuspid valve. So if you look at the tricuspid valve right here, the valve is solid. There's no blood going from the right atrium into the right ventricle. The only way that this is sustained, is you survive this, is if there is an ASD. And usually what happens here is you'll also have a VSD. You have to have the VSD to get the blood into the right ventricle to eventually get it into the lungs. So that's tricuspid atresia, not stenosis, atresia. The clinical signs here, or since it's a cyanotic process, you're decreasing blood flow to the lungs, or all the things you would expect. Left ventricular hypertrophy occurs because of the increased preload because of the septal defects. The repair of tricuspid atresia is difficult and it occurs over time. I just threw this up here that it's an open heart surgical procedure. It's kind of bizarre because it involves replumbing, moving the superior vena cava from the right atrium and anastomosing it with the pulmonary artery in order to increase blood flow to the lungs, increase oxygenation.
So the atresia, does it have to have the ASD and VSD, or could you replace the VSD with the PDA?
Yes, yes. As long as you can get blood from the right atrium into the lungs, you're good.
Same answer.
Yeah. If you can't, you're dead. If you don't have an ASD, you're dead. Within minutes after birth.
Did you know before birth that they have this, potentially?
Yes, usually because of ultrasounds, prenatal ultrasounds. This is going to affect growth. Now, pulmonary atresia is the same type of deal, except the outflow from the right ventricle is blocked. The way you're going to get, so how are you going to get blood to the lungs? through a PDA. This is one of those ductal dependent deals. What are you gonna do with the blood coming from, since you have an intact tricuspid valve, what are you gonna do with all the venous blood entering the right atrium? You have to have an ASD to get it out of there. With pulmonary atresia, you always have right heart, poorly developed right heart.
You said you have to have an ASD, you're not saying BS? Is that?
There are two things here.
Okay,
This is with an intact septum,
okay.
and I'm going to show you here in just a second with a VSD. So this right here, the PFO is a patent foraminovalve, what that stands for. Zane?
Why would the right ventricle be underdeveloped? Wouldn't it be enlarged because you're not able to get blood up through there?
There's no blood entering it,
Entering the right
the
ventricle?
right ventricle. There's blood entering the right ventricle, it's just not working to get it out. It can't push it out. So what you wind up with is, in terms of volume, a hypoplastic right heart. In terms of the musculature, it's hypertrophy.
Okay,
Okay? I don't know if I said that right before.
that makes sense.
All right. So without a VSD, the blood flows to the other side of the heart, at the atrial level. It has to. And what you wind up with here is an enlarged heart. Pulmonary oligemia is a decreased amount of blood to the lung, it's the outflow, a decreased cardiac output from that side. Note how lucent the pulmonary markings are. How black the lung fields are, because you're not having the pulmonary congestion or the pulmonary blood flow that you would normally have. Now, pulmonary atresia with a VSD, so here's the VSD right there. This is a lot different. Not in terms of the outcomes. You still have congestive failure, failure to thrive, cyanosis and things like that. But you have another opportunity to get blood into the right side. Therefore, the right ventricle is more normal appearance, normal in appearance with a VSD. So what's going on here is that note the direction of blood flow. You've got blood entering the right atrium, then into the right ventricle. There is no outlet from the right ventricle, so the blood goes across the VSD into the left ventricle. So the direction of blood flow is opposite of what you would normally see in a VSD. Again, this is a hypoperfusion of the lungs, so you're going to see that in the pulmonary markings. They're not going to be congested like you would see in the acyanotic conditions. Hypoplastic left heart is just a failure of the left ventricle to develop well or appropriately. It's usually accompanied by one or more of several other defects. These numbers up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, correspond to these bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can follow those through there. with a hypoplastic left heart, it's the right heart that has to supply the whole body, both the lungs and the rest of the body. And it has to do that through the PDA. As it says down here, closure of that PDA is going to result in death. Transposition of the great arteries or transposition of great vessels. This is kind of cool. You know what we were talking about yesterday, that everything's coiling around, twisting around each other? This is when that twisting fails to happen. So what you wind up with is on the right ventricle, coming out of the right ventricle, you have the aorta. Coming out of the left ventricle, you have the pulmonary artery. Now, follow me here. Coming out of the right ventricle, you have the aorta. Where is it going to? Going to the body. What's coming into the right ventricle? Venous blood from the rest of the body. So you have a circulation there that doesn't go through the lungs. What happens on the left side? You've got, goes out the pulmonary artery to the lungs, and the left atrium receives the pulmonary veins. So you have this circulation over here, and they're separate. And the only thing that's going to keep you alive will be holes like a PDA or an ASD or VSD. Otherwise, you're not going to oxygenate your blood. Oh, it says that requires, to maintain life, a hole. That's kind of cool. I've never seen a case of this, but I'm sure this would be fixed well before they grew up. The egg on the side is the X-ray sign for transposition. Now, tetralogy of Fallot is, there are 4 defects. You got, these are every board I've ever taken, Pants and Pantry has always had these damn 4 things on it. Which of the following is one of the problems with tetralogy of Fallot? So know those 4 things. Okay? You can live with tetralogy of Fallot into adulthood. The problem, the determinant factor for surgical correction, though, is the first bullet point, the pulmonary artery stenosis. This is the issue here. Okay? So because of those different things, you get, because you have pulmonary artery stenosis, you're going to have right ventricular hypertrophy and poor perfusion of the lungs. Because the aorta normally it's sitting up here. So the aorta, the left ventricle comes up to the aortic valve, and then you have the aorta. So in tetralogy, what happens is the aorta actually, it's like a prolapse. It extends down into the left ventricle. Early cyanosis, unless surgically repaired, if it's severe. TET spells occur in kids, and what they are periods of cyanosis. This is one of the cyanotic problems. That's triggered by a change in systemic vascular resistance. Okay, this is what they these are the characteristics of TET spells here. So the kid could be eating and then go into this exacerbation of hypoxemia. Uh, So, and what happens here is that, like, for, it says eating or crying, that decreases systemic vascular resistance. If you decrease systemic vascular resistance, what happens to the defects in the heart? So if we go back over here, so you've got a VSD is one of the four things, right? So what happens is you decrease systemic vascular resistance, and ordinarily you've got a left to right shunt, but because the resistance goes down to the periphery, now you have a right to left shunt. And if you have a right to left shunt, that means less blood going to the lungs and cyanosis. So the treatment for this is to increase systemic vascular resistance. Oh, I think I had the treatment in here. Hang on just a second. This is a slide I added last night. One of the things about tetralogy of Fallot that's unusual, it's not one of the four things. It's called a right-sided aortic arch. If you'll notice on this, this actually doesn't show it right here. I added this image last night. The right-sided aortic arch, the normal aortic arch is over here. It's over the left main bronchus. But in right side, it goes actually around the trachea. That's an anomaly that's seen with tetralogy as well, but not part of the heart disease itself. You don't do anything about it, it's just a finding with it, okay? The radiographic image here is like the little shoe from Holland. If you kind of, you can almost, if you squint your eyes, you can, well, run with it here, come on, just, okay? So the management of a TEP spell, as I said, was to increase systemic vascular resistance. You can do that by pulling the knees up into the chest. You can give them oxygen. Fluid bolus will increase systemic, that's obvious, right? We know that. Morphine will actually work not on the resistance itself, but the agitation related to it. And phenylephrine, yeah, we'll also do it, Sudafed. Okay. The procedure to correct this is you start off as an infant with a Blalock-Taussig shunt. And what they do with that is they take the right subclavian artery and anastomose it with the right pulmonary artery, increasing blood flow to the lungs. Then as you get older, what they do is go in and take down the shunt and repair the 4 defects within the heart itself. You don't need to, as far as these repairs, specific names of these repairs and things like that, you don't need to know that. I'm just telling you that this is how you repair them. Here's an odd duck. Dextrocardia occurs simply when the folding of the heart tube goes the other direction. So here's normal and it just goes the other direction. Dextrocardia by itself is different than a total reversal of the structure in the chest and abdomen. That's situs inversus totalis. So the appendix is on the left side, the heart's on the right side. I've seen 2 cases of dextrocardia in my life. One of them was known before I went in there. The other one I picked up. Because you put your stethoscope on the chest, where's the heart? You're searching all around for it. You put it over here, and there it is pounding away. when I was a student, was the first time. The pediatrician told me to go in there and take a look at this boy. So I go in there, and not only did he have dextrocardia, he was missing like 3 ribs on the left side. I don't know, it wasn't surgical, it was a congenital defect. He was missing 3 ribs. So I came out and I said, well, he has no ribs on that side of his body. And I totally freaking missed the fact that his heart was on the other side.
Do their lung structures change, like the number of lobes?
Everything stays the same. Everything, it's just the heart. It's just the heart. It's, oh, you mean in birth, the totalis?
Right.
Yeah, everything's changed.
Even in this one?
No,
the heart-
dextrocardia is just the heart. Just the heart. The plumbing is still the same. It's just the heart's flipped over to the other side. And that's it. Randy?
We had an insurer talk to us during, I think, ER, who said that like sometimes you can have your vena cava on the left side. Is that something that would be a pathological issue?
Not that I'm aware of. The only thing that may relate to that is in 3rd trimester pregnancy, if you're going to position the mom on the left or right side. You always put a pregnant mom on her left side, and that keeps the uterus off of the inferior vena cava, which is normally on the right side. But if you have a left-sided inferior vena cava, I would think they have to go the other way. So that's the only time I would think that would be an issue. It would be a bad mistake, because the reason you do that is if mom is lying on her right side, the venous blood from the placenta is inhibited, and so the fetus becomes hypoxic because of decreased venous return. Okay? All righty, that's all I got to say.